with a thumb. She blinked. Then everything fell apart. One by one, people began folding their blanket. The wine bottles disappeared. The speaker system went silent. Even the candle guy, yes, he was back again, picked up his merchandise and quietly packed his basket. A second deputy vehicle rolled in, this time parking across the gate like a makeshift barricade. Karen tried calling someone on her phone but was interrupted by one of the officers, who held up a finger and motioned her to step aside. A few guests began to murmur, glancing around nervously. The entire group, which 10 minutes ago had been sipping Chardonnay and discussing the scent of pine, now looked like they were at a high school party that just got raided by the vice principal. I stayed inside but kept watching, the cameras capturing every twitch, every sideways glance, every unspoken admission that this wasn't just awkward, it was illegal. Karen was eventually escorted to her car, not arrested, but firmly warned and visibly humiliated. Her face had that red and white mottled flush of someone who realized the story she'd been telling wasn't just falling apart, it had never been true to begin with. The other guests dispersed without fanfare, most leaving quickly, others pretending to check their phones to avoid eye contact. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees, the only thing left was a knocked-over paper banner half stuck in the dirt and the unmistakable emptiness of a party that wasn't supposed to happen in the first place. I didn't say a word, didn't wave, didn't even show myself. The gate stayed locked. The camera kept recording. And Karen? She drove away with her sunglasses on, though it was already dark, a final, desperate shield between her and the reality she couldn't control. Later that night, I reviewed the footage with Cal, who couldn't stop laughing at the look on the HOA board member's face when he realized they were being filmed. We clipped together a short video compilation with no commentary, just the sound of soft jazz fading into sheriff radios and the crunch of gravel beneath embarrassed shoes. I didn't post it yet. I was saving it, because something told me this wasn't over. Karen had been hit. By the time the dust from the so-called Lake Day celebration had settled, I figured Karen might finally take the hint. 3 events, 3 shutdowns, each more humiliating than the last, all tied together by the single fact that she still didn't own an inch of the land she kept trying to colonize with bunting and folding chairs. But if there's one thing more stubborn than a wet raccoon inside a trash can, it's an HOA president drunk on imagined power. I was out on my porch replacing a warped deck board when the envelope came, hand-delivered, no return address, just a printed label in an aggressive serif font that said, "To the occupant of Lot 9." That alone made me laugh. They couldn't even bring themselves to address me by name, just a cold little property code like I was some forgotten corner of a spreadsheet. I opened it with a pocket knife and unfolded the papers inside. What I found was so absurd, so perfectly Karen, that I had to sit down. It was a formal summons to attend an emergency HOA board meeting, scheduled for the following Wednesday at 6 p.m., at the community center. The topic: discussion and resolution regarding the ongoing hostility, obstruction, and non-compliance of Lot 9 in relation to recent community enrichment initiative. There were 7 bullet points. 7. Each one more ridiculous than the last. Number 3 accused me of spreading misinformation through unverified social media footage, which I assume referred to the wedding meltdown video that was now creeping toward 60,000 views. Number 5 accused me of withholding access to shared recreational space, despite the fact that my deed and title had been publicly verified and posted to the HOA's own website by a member of their own legal team just a week prior. And my personal favorite, number 7, stated that if I failed to appear, the board would proceed with internal resolution options including but not limited to reassignment of boundary easements. That one made me snort. Reassignment of easements. Like they thought they could vote my land into their fantasy map with enough signatures and sheet cake. I folded the paper and set it on the table next to my coffee. I didn't need to attend the meeting. I didn't need to argue with people who thought a clipboard outweighed a county recorder's seal. What I needed to do, what I was already planning to do, was something far more permanent. because the truth was, Karen had revealed something I'd always suspected. She believed she could erase lines just by pretending they didn't exist. And people like her never stop until you draw a line with a chisel and pour concrete on top. I called my lawyer, Mr. Dugan, and told him it was time to proceed with the clause. The clause wasn't new. It was tucked into the original subdivision development document filed over 2 decades ago, before the HOA had ever formed. Back then, the developer had carved out several lots as sovereign parcels, due to access constraints, utility rights, and environmental exemptions. Mine was one of them. And in that clause, buried deep in the language, was the right to formally secede from any future associations or binding community agreements if 3 separate incidents of unauthorized use could be proven. The only catch? They had to occur within 1 calendar year, be documented, and each must result in formal complaint or enforcement involvement. I had all 3. The wedding, the wellness event, the Lake Day embarrassment with sheriff presence and guest dispersal. All caught on camera, all documented, all legally validated. And now I was exercising that clause like pulling an emergency brake on a train barreling toward my property line. Dugan filed the motion the next day. It was concise, lethal, and delivered with evidence so dense it might as well have been its own zip code. It was sent to the county clerk, the HOA board, the township office, and Karen's personal email for good measure. By law, once filed, the HOA could no longer issue fines, levy complaints, or claim any say over the land, nor could they attempt to involve the property in future community decisions. I was out. Permanently. But I wasn't finished. I decided to attend the emergency meeting anyway. Not to debate. Not to defend. Just to watch. Cal and I arrived 5 minutes early and took seats in the back of the room, dressed in jeans and work boots while everyone else looked like they were heading to a fake congressional hearing. Karen sat at the front behind a folding table with 2 other board members flanking her like backup singers who'd forgotten the chorus. She smiled when she saw me, but it was a brittle smile, the kind people wear when they know they've already lost but still have a script to finish. She opened the meeting with her usual voice, sickly sweet and lined with venom, welcoming everyone and thanking them for being willing to engage in hard conversations. Then she launched into her speech, filled with words like obstruction, division, and unity. There were printed copies of text. Even a photo of a flipped champagne bucket she claimed had been willfully left as a safety hazard. I said nothing, just listened. Then, as she prepared to vote on a motion to restrict Lot 9's access to community pathways, I stood up, cleared my throat, and walked to the front. Karen paused, blinked. "Mr. Langston," she said, voice tight. "You'll have your chance during the public comment period." I handed her a manila envelope. "No need," I said. "I just wanted you to have this. It's already been filed, but you seemed like the kind of person who prefers to read things on paper." She took it reluctantly, opened it, and began scanning the first few lines. Her mouth slowly parted. She flipped to the 2nd page, then the 3rd. By the time she got to the notarized statement of exemption, her hands were visibly shaking. I turned and walked out, Cal following behind me, barely holding back his laughter. We didn't need to stay for the rest. The silence in that room was already echoing louder than any vote could. That night, the HOA website was temporarily taken offline. The group chat went silent. And Karen? She didn't show up to her morning walks for the first time in 2 years. But I wasn't celebrating yet, because when a control freak loses power, they usually try to set fire to the whole board before stepping down. And true to form, she came back swinging 2 days later with a new tactic, one I hadn't anticipated. She filed a petition with the county zoning board claiming that my gate, which blocked road access to the property, was built illegally and obstructed what she now claimed was a community fire lane. It was complete fiction, but annoying enough that I had to spend 2 hours printing maps, emails, and fire safety code to prove otherwise. I met the inspector out there myself, walked him through every inch, showed him where the true easement was, and even dug out the original post markers with a shovel. He left satisfied. I left irritated. But I realized then that Karen didn't need to win to keep fighting. She just needed to annoy me enough that I gave up. And that's when I had my next idea. If she wanted to bury me in paperwork, I'd bury her in paperwork with actual consequences. So I began compiling a dossier. Not just on Karen, but on the entire HOA. Misused funds. Improper vote. Bylaws rewritten without quorum. Events planned without permit. I interviewed neighbors who'd been fined unfairly. I found it was about time I hosted something of my own, not in spite but in silence, the kind of move that doesn't come with flyers or fanfare but hits so hard it echoes through every entitled HOA meeting to follow. After weeks of sparring with Karen and watching her twist herself into legal knots, I decided it was time to flip the narrative and turn the tables on the very idea of what she called community leadership. Instead of another ambush or confrontation, I planned a private event on my land, fully permitted, entirely legal, and publicly visible in all the right ways. The guest list was small but strategic. The sheriff who'd responded to the trespassing report, the zoning official who'd confirmed my gate's legality, the county clerk who'd filed my exemption, Roger the surveyor, Cal, and a few close neighbors who'd silently cheered me on from their porches for months. I called it an appreciation cookout, nothing flashy. Just smoked ribs, iced drinks, and quiet laughter around a fire pit that Karen once claimed was a visual hazard from across the lake. The date I picked? The same evening Karen had scheduled her HOA board meeting to vote on new landscaping ordinances and, supposedly, reappoint herself as chair after a recent emergency vote removed her temporarily for behavior deemed disruptive to unity. I scheduled the cookout on purpose for the same time and sent out invitations exactly 3 days before, with the location listed clearly as Langston Lake property, confirmed private lot. I attached scanned legal maps, a QR code to the permits, and even a little note at the bottom that read, "Please bring lawn chairs, not lawsuit." Within hours, my phone lit up with RSVPs. Apparently, most of these folks had been looking for a reason to skip Karen's meeting anyway. As the evening approached, I set the stage with calm precision. The dock was freshly scrubbed, string lights zigzagged from the big oak tree to the shed, and the smell of applewood smoke floated over the water. Cal helped man the grill, and Roger brought his ancient stereo to play old jazz records that hissed and cracked like they came from another era. The county clerk arrived in shorts and flip-flops, a beer in one hand and his tie left in the car. The sheriff brought a peach cobbler his wife had baked. We laughed, we ate, and not a single voice raised in complaint. Meanwhile, on the other side of the lake, Karen's meeting sputtered into chaos. One of the board members texted me a photo from inside. Only 6 attendees, 2 of whom had come just for the donut. The meeting had to be adjourned early due to a lack of quorum. I didn't respond. I just poured myself another drink and turned up the music. At one point in the evening, while passing around plates of brisket, the sheriff pulled me aside and said something that stuck with me. He looked around at the relaxed faces, the laughter floating through the pines, and said, "You know, this is the kind of neighborhood Karen pretends she's protecting." And he was right. This wasn't about land or law anymore. It was about principle. The simple idea that respect can't be demanded with paperwork or title badges. It has to be earned with behavior. Karen had tried to claim authority by force, by fear, by manipulation. I was reclaiming peace by letting it speak for itself. But the night wasn't over yet. As the moon rose and the last bites of cobbler were scraped from paper plates, headlights flashed at the far end of the road. Not from a guest, but from Karen's vehicle, creeping toward the gate like a moth drawn to its own humiliation. She parked outside and stepped out in a crisp white blouse like she was headed to a fundraiser. She stood just beyond the gate, hands on hips, trying to peer through the foliage, her lips moving as she muttered something into her phone. One of the guests noticed and chuckled softly. Cal raised his beer and whispered, "She's gonna implode." Karen made a call. My phone buzzed. I let it ring.